Hello and welcome back to Creepy Encounters. We have some new real-life creepy encounters for you today straight from Reddit. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the videos and keep you windows locked in today's video. What was your creepy, unexplainable story as a child that was confirmed by your parents to have happened? In the house I grew up in, every night at around midnight these big loud footsteps would go stomping up and down the hallway a few times. I'd often think it was my dad getting up in the night, so sometimes I would stick my head out in the hall to see him, but there was no one there and I'd hear him snoring in his room. This isn't a particularly creepy story, but it's just strange that everyone confirms they heard these footsteps and no one was ever that bothered by it. It's like it happened for as long as we could remember, so we just accepted it. Was looking for a Halloween costume with my mom to wear to elementary school, which was a big deal to me because I was homeschooled at first. We spent a couple of hours going to several stores and couldn't find anything that I liked. It was getting dark outside, so we were going to have to find something and go home soon. There was an old Halloween costume store, one of those really weird places that somehow is open year-round, that we decided to go to as a last-ditch effort to find something. We got out of the car and walked through the front doors and get 3 steps into this place and I instantly have all the hair on my body stand on end. I felt huge oppressive pressure on my whole body, like the physical feeling of being hated by something, combined with it wanting to hurt me and wanting me to leave. My little 3rd grade, I think that's when it happened, self turned to look at my mom, and in the same instant she turned to look at me. We didn't say a thing to each other, just turned around, after only walking 3 steps into the store, and went back to the car. I remember getting inside and asking my mom if she felt the same thing, and she said that she had had essentially the same experience as me. We prayed together in the car and left. For perspective, I, as an elementary school kid who desperately wanted to fit in with the other kids that I had recently joined in public school, willingly left our literal last chance to find a costume that I thought would help me fit in, because of a physical feeling of being hated that I got when we walked into the store. As an adult I can still remember how bad it was and I'm getting tensed up just writing about it. I did end up with a costume that year though. We went home and she stayed up late with me working to cobble together a cowboy costume from things we had at home. I had a cowboy hat from my grandpa, some cowboy boots from somewhere, a button-down shirt that we ripped a bit to make it rugged, a bright red bandana to tie around my neck, and a swanky, leather vest we made from a brown grocery bag that we cut some super cool tassel fringe onto. When I was young, I apparently had a few odd interactions with animals. I would know a person had animals before we went in the house. They tended to come over to me before my parents, mostly just little things that were probably explainable by me, a fairly observant little kid. The one that sticks out to my parents though, telling it the way they do, is we went to a new car garage to have them work on our car. As we pull up, the owner has a big old black lab laying in the middle of the lobby. The guy informs us the dog is comfortable with people, we can pet him if we want. I shake my head and say, "He's sad though." Dad looks at me, asks why I think that. I reply, "He lost his ball, he's sad now." Dad said the owner went pale, stared at me for a minute, and then looked at Dad, said, "He's had a favorite ball for 10 years that just went down the sewage drain yesterday and I couldn't get it back out." One time my brother, his friend, and I saw lights in the sky that darted around like UFOs. We went to get my mom and she was totally nonchalant about it. "Yep, those are UFOs," she said, and went back in the house. Her response was so subdued that we figured she was humoring us and they weren't actually UFOs. Years later I asked her about it and she said she had to force herself to act calmly because she was terrified. I'm not 100% sure this fits because my mom confirmed it years ago, then denied it when I asked her again a couple months ago, but here it is. When I was little, my dresser, it was long but pretty short, sat against the wall with one of the ends pointed to my door. That dresser is heavy, an old wood one with all sorts of kid crap neatly arranged on top. Since it was in my bedroom, the floor was carpet. I always slept with the door closed. One night, with no explanation, the dresser tipped over. But instead falling forward, it fell 180 degrees to the side, falling in front of my door, all the kid crap spilling to the side. My mom ran to get me, but couldn't open the door as it was being blocked by the dresser. Eventually, with her pushing and me pulling on the dresser, she was able to slip in and move the dresser out of the way. Nothing was damaged, not even the glass figurines I had. My dad helped put it upright the next day and we moved on. Years later, I remembered the incident and asked my mom about it, expecting to learn that I blew it out of proportion and it only fell forward or something like that. Nope, she remembered that night as well. However, she added one detail that I could never figure out. She thought she heard me jumping on the bed that night, and that was why she thought the dresser tipped over. I had been asleep. I have no idea where she heard that noise coming from. I'm a parent of toddlers and kids now, and I have a creepy story from last year. We were driving with my then 3-year-old son in the car, and stopped at a red light next to a cemetery. Out of nowhere, my son looked over at the cemetery and said, "There are people laying down there, and they can't get up." My wife asked my son what he was talking about and he pointed to the cemetery and said, "All of the people laying down in the park are stuck." My wife and I just looked at each other in silence, completely freaked out. At this point in our son's life, there had been no deaths in the family and we had never discussed death with him. I'm still creeped out when I think about it. When I was a kid, my family lived in a blue house that was oddly shaped. One year the house got completely gutted and nearly destroyed by a flood, and they had to knock down a wall between the living room and kitchen. So after the flood, you could see all the way down the hall to my parents' bedroom door. This house was strange for lack of a better term. I was a terrible sleeper as a kid and would routinely wake up and just go into the living room and watch cartoons on low volume if I couldn't go back to sleep. One morning I'm out in the living room sitting across the chair with my feet up on a window. Don't ask me why, I was a stupid 8 or 9-year-old. From where the chair was, I could see just over the kitchen counter down that hall to my parents' room. A movement caught my eye. I looked up and saw the shadowy outline of a man walking towards me, kind of near to my parents' door. Thinking it was my dad, I said something like, "Hey Dad, sorry if the TV was too loud. Dad is a notoriously light sleeper and would wake up from anything." Except there was no response. Within seconds my foot ends up going through the window, again not sure if this is related or I was a dumb kid, likely the latter, and I scream, and my parents actually wake up to figure out what's going on at 4:30 in the morning. At this point I'm preoccupied, but realize much later that I definitely saw the outline of a man, but there was no way it was my dad because A, he came bounding out of their bedroom after my scream, and B, I realized the shoulders of that outline were much higher than what my dad's would have been. Fast forward to a few years ago, we've moved far away from the blue house, and my mom and I are hanging out and catching up. For some reason the blue house comes up and I tell Mom that the place still gave me creeps and weird stuff happened there when I was a kid. Mom's response: "Oh, you must have saw the shadow man too." Edit, photos of the house. First picture, the picture from the front has the front door and my room's window. That right side was the second hallway that had my room on one end and my sister's room on the other with a bathroom between. Second picture, the side picture, you can see how the house goes back. The very back was my parents' room. I put my foot through the middle of the 3 windows on the second picture. I was very young when this happened, so what I remember and what I was told is the main scariness for this story. So my family was driving around the backwoods on NHME area in the autumn to watch the leaves fall. We were staying at some cottage and my family came to this area pretty frequently. We were coming back from somewhere when my mother started screaming at my father for stopping abruptly. In front of us, on an unkept back road in the deep woods of New England at a pretty late hour, was a traffic jam of quite a few cars stopped in all directions. I remember a lot of bright headlights. I also remember seeing my dad's face as he turned around so he could see where he was reversing the car. My mom went completely silent through this whole thing. I just remember my dad saying eerily calmly, I hate traffic." He turned around and started driving back up the road we came down, and we started seeing cars going past us flashing their headlights. My dad just kept driving. The whole atmosphere went from "wasn't that a fun day" to "let's leave." Even as a kid I went from annoying to quiet. Just a thickness in the air. Cars started coming up from behind honking and flashing lights, and eventually they just turned off the road and we drove back to the cottage. Years later, I mean decades later, my dad and me were having a beer together. He says, "Remember up in the woods up north? We were driving around and we came to a weird traffic jam?" I was like, "Yeah, why?" I honestly hadn't thought of it since that night. My dad goes, "Well, your mother and I were pretty sure that was one of those ambushes where they block the road and try to rob you and leave you in the woods or worse. You don't remember the cars coming up the road after us, trying to block us in? Or the cars chasing us and beeping at us until we hit random route?" Well, kinda, but I just figured it was traffic or people being weird. He just kinda stopped talking about it after that and went on about how we should plant more trees in the backyard, but ones that don't drop leaves, because leaves suck. My grandmother was a real estate agent in Rhode Island. I was staying with her one summer and she had to take me along to see a potential listing. It was a very strange house because it was circular. All the rooms went along the outside and connected to each other, and there was a center part with a little garden and open to the sky. She went up to the second story and I stayed downstairs because I wanted to walk around the loop one time. The problem started when I had walked a full loop and I didn't see the stairs. I thought I must be confused, so I kept going to the next room and still couldn't find them. I started to panic, so I began running around the house as fast as possible, checking every room for stairs, and there wasn't any. Finally, I sat down by the front door and started crying. A little while later my grandmother ran into the entryway room looking just as panicked as I had been and asking where I was hiding and why I was hiding, and not answering her, calling out to me. I never heard her calling out to me at all. Actually, the house seemed so still and quiet while I was sitting there that I was sure she had forgotten and left me there. We went home and didn't talk about it really. Like 15 years later I brought it up to my mom and asked if she knew anything, or was this a crazy childhood nightmare I'm remembering? She told me she remembered it clearly because my grandmother had called her and was absolutely spooked because she couldn't explain what had happened and she thought she lost me or I had been taken by someone while she was distracted. She had apparently been looking for me for a while. I still don't understand what happened really because the house wasn't even large or confusing to navigate. I still get chills when I think about it.
I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more real-life creepy encounters around.